on Masechta Shabbos, Daf Beis Amud Aleph. What we're going to do is open a new Sugya in Hilchos Chanuka today. And after we open the Sugya, we're going to skip several lines and go to the conclusion of the Sugya, and then go on in Hilchos Chanuka. Daf Beis Amud Aleph. We are two lines before the lines get wide. The lines get wide towards the bottom of the page, so we're two lines before the lines get wide. It's the last word on the line, Itmar. Itmar, Rav Oma Eimad Likim Miner Liner. Rav says you cannot light one Chanuka candle from another Chanuka candle. In other words, let's take a simple case. It's a case that the Gemara will develop on Amud Beis. Those are some of the lines we're going to skip. Let's say you have a Chanuka candle, or you're using oil. In either case, it's a very long wick, and the candles are set up next to each other. After you light the first candle, can you take the wick and bend the wick, the lit wick, can you bend it to the candle next to it so that you'll light the next candle from the first candle? In other words, let's say it's the fourth night. So you're lighting 1, 2, 3, 4. How do you light 1, 2, 3, 4? By lighting the fourth one. We went through that. Light number 4. Number 4 has a long wick. You bend the wick over and you light number 3. Then you take number 3 and you bend the wick and you light number 2. Then you take the wick of number 2, you bend it and light number 1. You don't have a shamash. Whatever the case is, that's all you have is a match. You strike the match, you make the bracha, you light the fourth candle, the match goes out, you have no other fire. Can you take 4 and light 3, 3 and light 2, 2 and light 1? Can you light one Chanuka candle from another Chanuka candle? Now, from the way we learned, the answer to this question would appear pretty simple. Remember, we learned that it's only the first candle that's the mitzvah. Once you lit the first candle, you were yoytze hadlakas neiros Chanuka. The other candles that you light are only hidur mitzvah. It's just to beautify the mitzvah. And the way we beautify the mitzvah is we do 4, 3, 2, 1. Beis Shammai says 1, 2, 3, 4. But we beautify the mitzvah by doing 4, 3, 2, 1. But that's a beautification of the mitzvah. The ikar mitzvah is that first candle. So if I were to say to you, I make a bracha, I lit number 4 on night number 4. I've done the mitzvah. Now I just want to do something beautiful. I want to light 3, 2, and 1. Our knee-jerk, quote-unquote, reaction would be, you can't do that. Because the first candle is mitzvah. The second one is to beautify the mitzvah. They're not on the same level. It's almost as if we go back to the rule of Mailin Bakodesh Velo Moridin. You can go up in Kedusha, but you can't go down in Kedusha. Here you're taking the candle that is the mitzvah, and you want to do something else with it. It is true what you want to do with it is still connected to Chanuka, but you've done the mitzvah of Chanuka, that first candle. Now you want to do something beautiful to add to Chanuka, so you have this question of whether you're allowed to do such a thing. So that's how we would have learned the question, but the Gemara is not using our assumption. The Gemara is actually questioning whether you can even do that, okay? Whether you can even light number 4 to number 3.
But isn't there a rule of ein mishtamshin?
Okay, so this is going to bring us back to the other question we had. Haneros halolu kodeshem ve'ein lanu rishus lehishtamesh behem. What does lehishtamesh behem mean? So there's a big machlokes in the Rishonim whether lehishtamesh behem means. Remember, we learned earlier in the Gemara a few lines above, you can't count money using the light of Chanuka. We learned that you can't read a book, you can't tie your shoes. But what happens if someone wants to sit down and learn Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos next to the Ner Chanukah?
He's not allowed to.
So we had three reasons why you can't use the Ner Chanukah. One, the Gemara above said bizui mitzvah. It's insulting to the mitzvah. It's insulting to Ner Chanukah to count money at your Ner Chanukah. It's insulting to the mitzvah, Ner Chanukah, to tie your shoes there. Is it insulting to learn Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos by Ner Chanukah? Okay, so we raised that question. But then there's another reason you can't use the Ner Chanukah, which is Parsume Nisa. Rashi said, if you're learning next to your Ner Chanukah, nobody will know that it's for the miracle of Chanukah. So even if I'm learning Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos next to my Ner Chanukah, it's a beautiful thing. But people who see what I'm doing will not understand that it's a Ner Chanukah, so I lose my Parsume Nisa. And you have the third reason you can't use the Ner Chanukah, because it has to be like commemorating the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. The menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, you couldn't learn Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos next to that Gemara, next to that Ner in the Beis Hamikdash. So it depends what reason you have, and we're going to take a look at this as we go through the Sugya. That's one of the major points for going to be in the Sugya. To what extent can you use Ner Chanukah, if at all? The Ramban, Nachmanides, says, I'll tell you I think we may have read it, but I'll read we may have mentioned it. I don't know if I read the Lashon. The Ramban says, and this is a machlokes in Rishonim, and it becomes a machlokes in Shulchan Aruch. Can you learn next to the Ner Chanukah? Today we don't have these kind of shilas, right? We have electricity, you flip on the switch. In those days, people lived in one room or in two rooms, and the light that they had in their house was based on candles. Every night they came home and lit candles. And when the person wanted to learn, he lit candles. So now it's the night of Hanukkah. If you light candles and you learn by your candles, nobody knows it's Hanukkah. Last night it wasn't Hanukkah and you were learning by your menorah. 2 months ago it was not Hanukkah and you were learning by your menorah. And tonight it's Hanukkah, but you're learning by a menorah. Nobody knows it's Hanukkah. Can you learn by a Ner Chanukah? So the Ramban says, I'm reading the Ramban now. This was the early sugya about whether you can benefit from the light of Hanukkah. Kol tashmishin b'mitzvah. When we say you cannot use the light of Hanukkah, we're talking about for anything. Bein the mitzvah to go in Suda Shabbos. Let's say you have your Hanukkah candles lit on your table. Remember, we learned that b'shas sakana, when it was dangerous to light in the window or in the public area, you lit on your table. So they lit on the table, and now it's Friday night. They lit their Hanukkah candles Friday night on the dining room table. Can you eat using that light? Sudas mitzvah, Suda Shabbos. Ramban says no. You cannot use the Hanukkah candles for light to eat the Suda. The Imtaima, the Ramban asks, if you're going to ask me a question, the Suda Shabbos might be zui mitzvah ikka. The Ramban's following the Gemara. The Gemara earlier said, right before the Gemara we're about to start, the Gemara said, remember we're learning about Sukkah. Can you use the decorations in the Sukkah? When you're covering up the blood of a bird or a chaya that you shechted, kisui adam, you have to do it with your hand. You can't kick the dirt with your foot. Why? Bizui mitzvah. You can't insult the mitzvah. Counting money at the Ner Chanukah is insulting to the mitzvah. What's insulting to the mitzvah if you're going to eat a Suda Shabbos by the Ner Chanukah? It's beautiful. The Ner Chanukah is a mitzvah, and you're going to use that mitzvah to do another mitzvah. What's wrong with learning Gemara next to the Ner Chanukah? The Ner Chanukah is a mitzvah, and you're going to do another mitzvah with the mitzvah. The Ramban says, lav milsigi. It's not a question. The kol she'odem mishtamish mitzvah zula acheres. When a person uses one mitzvah to help him accomplish another mitzvah, bizui mitzvahi. you're still insulting the mitzvah. The michzi, because it looks like command lechaviva lehach mitzvah, va'ovid mitzvah chriti. What does it look like when you take a Gemara and you put it down next to your Chanuka candles and you learn by the Chanuka candles? It looks like you're saying that learning Torah is more important than the mitzvah of Hadlakas Nevis Hanukkah. Because we generally say you're not allowed to use the Ner Hanukkah. You can't read by it, you can't count money, you can't tie your shoes. You're not allowed to use the Ner Hanukkah because it's holy. I'm going to learn Gemara next to Ner Hanukkah. Why? Because learning Gemara is more holy than the Ner Hanukkah. So it's still a bizui mitzvah. It may well be that in halacha, for example, in halacha, Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Talmud Torah is the most important mitzvah. Let us say that's what it means. Talmud Torah is the most important mitzvah. And Talmud Torah is more important than the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. Let us say that that's true. I'm not saying it's true. Let us say that it's true. But if you're going to learn by the Ner Chanukah, what you're saying is, I can't tie my shoes, I can't read a book, I can't count money because it's a mitzvah. But I can learn Gemara because it's not such a big mitzvah. So you're still insulting the Ner Chanukah, and therefore the Ramban says you can't even do a mitzvah keneged Ner Chanukah. But here, this is where the question comes in, Baruch. If I want to light one Chanukah candle from another Chanukah candle, that's not embarrassing. Learning Torah against the Ner Chanukah could be embarrassing to the Ner Chanukah because I'm doing a different mitzvah with the Ner Chanukah. But what happens if I want to light Ner Chanukah from Ner Chanukah? That's not insulting to the Ner Chanukah because I'm doing the same mitzvah, Ner Chanukah from Ner Chanukah. So that's really the Gemara's question. Gemara says itmar, and it's a machlokes. Rav Oma Eimat Likin Miner Liner. Rav says you're not allowed to light one Chanukah candle to another Chanukah candle, which for us is, let's make believe we have one Chanukiah, and the Chanukiah has long wicks, and I'm able to bend on the fourth night wick 4 to light wick 3, bend wick 3 to light wick 2, bend wick 2 to light wick 1. Can I do that? Rav Oma Eimat Likin Miner Liner. Rav says he's not allowed to do such a thing. We don't know why yet, but the Gemara says Rav holds you're not allowed to do such a thing. Shmuel Oma, Shmuel says Madli. Shmuel says yes, you can do such a thing. You can light one Ner Chanukah from another Ner Chanukah. Rav Oma, there are 3 machlokes that the Gemara is going to quote here, which seem not to have anything to do with each other, but we'll see why they're connected. So case number 1, Rav says you can't light one Chanukah candle from another Chanukah candle, and Shmuel says you can. Rav Oma, ein matir in tzitzis mi beged lebeged. Rav holds, let's go back to the olden days. The olden days, men wore robes, and these robes had 4 corners, and the 4 corners had tzitzis on it. Not like we do today. We create a 4-corner garment to put under our shirt in order to be makayim the mitzvah of tzitzis. If a person doesn't put on the 4-cornered garment that we make today, he's not oiv on the mitzvah of tzitzis. The mitzvah of tzitzis is not that you have to wear tzitzis. The mitzvah of tzitzis is if you have a 4-cornered garment, you put tzitzis on a 4-cornered garment. We don't have 4-cornered garments really today, so nobody has to really wear tzitzis. But we don't want to walk around that way. Intentionally create a 4-cornered beged. We put tzitzis on, and we put it under our shirt, over our shirt, whatever the minhag is. But in those days, their garments were 4-cornered, and they put tzitzis on their beged. They wore robes, and the robes had slits, and the slits had corners, 4 corners, they had tzitzis. What happens if it came a time where a person was going to buy a new robe? and he wants to untie the tzitzit string from his old robe and put the tzitzit string on the new robe. For us, the question would be, you have the tzitzit you wear under your shirt. Okay, it got all sweated up, it got all stained, you can't wash it anymore. So you want to untie the tzitzis on the old beged, and you go into the Svarim store and you can buy just a beged with holes in it, without any strings. And you know how to tie the strings. So you go into the store and you buy yourself a beged without strings, and you come home. Are you allowed to untie the strings from the old beged and tie those strings to the new beged? The Rav holds you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to do it. You have to buy new strings. Why? We'll see why. Shmuel says matirin. Shmuel says you're allowed to untie the strings from the old beged and tie it to the new beged. So we have two disagreements between Rav and Shmuel. What does one have to do with the other? We'll see in a minute. Third case. Rav says, Ein halacha Reb Shimon b'greira. Rav says the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon b'greira, pulling a piece of furniture. Shmuel says, halacha Rabbi Shimon b'greira. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon b'greira, pulling a piece of furniture. What is this machlokes about? Let's take a look in Rashi. Halacha Rabbi Shimon. The Omar, this is one of the most important machlokes in Hilchos Shabbos, one of the most famous machlokes, one of the most important machlokes when we deal with Hilchos Shabbos. The Omar, Dovish ein miskavin mutter. Something, when you do something, and when you're doing it, something that you don't intend to happen happens, and you know it's going to happen. Is that a malacha on Shabbos? So Reb Shimon says, Dovish ein miskavin is mutter. What's the case? The famous case is Afal Gav Dika Ovid Choretz. In those days, what was a person's house made out of? He didn't have ceramic floors. He didn't pour concrete on his floors. What was the floor made out of? Sand, dirt. And when you wanted to clean your house, you would rake the floor. You wouldn't really, you couldn't sponge the floor. You couldn't really sweep the floor. They would literally rake the floor. There was a person I knew went somewhere in the Bahamas for a vacation, and he came across a small Orthodox synagogue that was hundreds of years old, and he went there to daven on Shabbos. And the floor was made out of sand. It was an old shul. They never did anything to the floor to keep the old look, and it was a floor of sand. And he asked the Gabbai, "What do you do here with the sand?" He said, "During the week, when we're allowed to, we have a cleaning person come in here, and he rakes the sand and he flattens out the top. After every davening, they rake it and flatten it." Okay. So in those days, a person's house was made out of sand, maybe pebbles. It's on Shabbos. Now on Shabbos, you want to move your table. And in order to move the table, you're going to schlep it across the floor. As you schlep the table across the floor, what are you going to do?
You make lines in the floor.
You're going to make holes in the floor. It's like digging. You're going to end up with holes in the floor. The Afal Gav, Rashi says, the Ka'ovet Charitz. Even though when you schlep the piece of furniture, you're going to make a hole in the ground. And when you make a hole in the ground, it's a malacha. What malacha is it? Have it told the chayrish. Either it's the malacha of chayrish, you're plowing. What's the malacha of chayrish? Turning over ground to make holes to put seeds in it. So here, you're turning over the pebbles or the dirt and you're making holes. Oh, bonet. Or it could be the malacha of bonet. You're building, you're constructing holes in order to be able to build. Okay, those are the three cases. In the third case, Rabbi Shimon holds that malacha she'ena miskaven, a davar she'ena miskaven, a davar she'ena miskaven, something that you have no intention of doing, but it gets done. You pull a piece of furniture, you end up making a hole in your floor. Are you allowed to pull the furniture on Shabbos? Reb Shimon says yes, because that's not the intention. What is your intention? To pull the piece of furniture from place A to place B. You don't care about the hole. You're
Yeah.
not planting seeds. You're not building a building. You're not doing anything. That's not your intention. So because you don't intend to do a malacha, the fact that the malacha occurs anyway is not a malacha. Therefore, you can schlep the furniture on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're not allowed to do it. Malacha, davar she'ena miskaven is awesome. So Rav here says the halacha is like is not like Reb Shimon. You're not allowed to move the furniture, and Shmuel says you can move the furniture. So here we have three arguments between Rav and Shmuel that don't look like they're connected in any which way. Rav says you can't light one candle to another candle. Shmuel says you can. Rav says you can't untie tzitzit strings from one beged to another beged, and Shmuel says you can. Rav says the halacha is you can't pull the piece of furniture on Shabbos because the davar she'ena miskaven is awesome. And Shmuel says you can pull the piece of furniture because the davar she'ena miskaven is mutar on Shabbos. Why are these three halachas put together? Now the Gemara explains. Amar Abaya, Abaya said, Kol mili damar ovid karav. Everything, Abaya's Rebbe was Rabbah, not Rava. Abaya's Baal Plukta, the Abaya's Chaver was Rava. Abaya and Rava. Rabbah was his Rebbe. So Abaya said, in everything where there was a machlokes Rav and Shmuel, my Rebbe Rabbah pasked like Rav. Whenever there was a machlokes Rav and Shmuel b'isuri, in questions of what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, when I say isure, that is to the exclusion of mamo, financial issues. We're not dealing with financial issues here. We're dealing here with isuri, things you're allowed to do or not allowed to do. Can you schlep the furniture on Shabbos? Can you untie the strings from the talis? Can you light one candle from another candle? So Abaya said, whenever there was a machlokes in isurim, my Rebbe Rabbah always followed Rav, except in these three cases. In these three cases, my Rebbe Rabbah followed Shmuel. That's why these three cases are always quoted together. These are the three cases where Rabbah, although he always followed Rav, in these three cases he followed Shmuel. Therefore, you can light one candle from another candle, and you can untie the tzitzis from one garment to another garment, and you're allowed to schlep the furniture on Shabbos because the davar she'ena miskaven is mutar. So my Rebbe, Amar Abaya, called Mili Damar Ovid Karav, Labame Hani Tlas David Kishmul. My Rebbe Rabbah followed Rav in everything b'isure, except these three things that he followed Shmuel. Matlikin miner lener, you can light from one candle to another. Umatirin mi beged lebeged, and you can untie the strings from one beged to another beged. Halacha Reb Shimon b'greira, and the halacha is like Reb Shimon by schlepping the furniture. The Tanya we learned Reb Shimon said, Geirer Ada Mita Kisei V'Safsol, a person can schlep a bed, a chair, or a bench, as long as he doesn't intend to make the hole. That's not what he wants to do. He just wants to get the piece of furniture from point A to point B. Even though a hole will occur, he doesn't intend it to happen, and therefore you're allowed to do it according to the halacha. Davar she'ena miskaven mutar, and then you have the Sugya of sikration. Now we're going to go into the sugya of, can you light a Chanuka candle from another Chanuka candle? The halacha about Shabbos, the Dover Sheina Meskaven is mutter, is one of the most broad. These are sugyas that are overarching to almost the whole Masechta Shabbos. There is a rule called psik reisha. Okay? And this psik reisha means if it's going to absolutely happen, you still can't do it. So, for example, psik reisha means it's going to definitely happen. A person, for example, can be a chacham. He wants to kill a chicken on Shabbos. So he takes a sheichet's knife, he shechs the chicken, and he cuts off the head. And he says that I really psik reisha v'lo yomus. What's the malacha of killing a chicken on Shabbos? We'll call it killing. You're not allowed to kill an animal on Shabbos. So the person says, I did cut off the chicken's head, but I didn't intend for the chicken to die. I just wanted to have the head. I needed to use the head for something, but I didn't want it to die. That is not a dover she'eina meskaven. Oh, I didn't intend. When I schlepped the furniture, I didn't intend to make the hole. I'm allowed to do that. I cut off the head of the chicken, but I didn't mean to kill it. There's something called psik reisha. If what you're doing has to result in something, then you can't say, I didn't mean it. If cutting off the head of a chicken is going to cause the death, there's no way around it. You can't say, I didn't intend to cause the death, because it's an absolute certainty that what you're doing will cause the death. So this whole sugya of I didn't intend to do it means that you didn't intend to do it and it didn't necessarily have to happen. But if you did it and you knew it had to happen, you can't do it on Shabbos. So this is a very big sugya. At any rate, we're going to now go into the sugya of lighting one wick from another wick on Chanuka. The Shabbos sugya stands for itself. It's a whole sugya. But what is the reason why Rav says you can't take off the strings of tzitzis from one article of clothing and put it on another article of clothing? What's the problem? I'm not using these tzitzis anymore. It's all stained up. And I want to take the strings off and put another beged. The Tosfos says there's really a number of possibilities here, which don't necessarily fit into the Shittas, but they introduce us into a sugya about tzitzis. Just an interesting sugya. There's a machlokes in Masechta Menachos what the mitzvah of tzitzis is. Is it a chayvas gavra or a chayvas mana? Meaning, let's say you own a four-cornered garment and you don't have tzitzis on it. You bought it. You bought a four-cornered garment and you want to hang it in your closet because you're going to wear it at your daughter's wedding in Yetz Hashem that's going to take place in 4 months. Are you allowed to have a four-cornered garment that you own hanging in your closet without tzitzis on it? Is the requirement that a garment that has four corners must have tzitzis? Or is it a mitzvah on the person? You shall not wear a four-cornered garment that doesn't have tzitzis. So if it's a chayvas gabra, it's a mitzvah on the person, then you can leave a four-cornered garment hanging in your closet, and you don't have to have tzitzis on it. When do you have to put tzitzis on it? When you put it on. If you're going to take it off and not wear it, you can take the strings off and hang it back in your closet. But if it's a chayvas mana, meaning it's a requirement that the four-cornered beged must have tzitzis, a Jew does not own a four-cornered beged without tzitzis, then even if it's hanging in your closet and you're not going to wear it, you need to have the strings on it. So therefore, let's assume for the moment that's the machlokes here. Rav says that the mitzvah of tzitzis is that the garment must have tzitzis. So therefore, if you buy a new garment, you can't untie the strings from the old garment and put it on the new garment, because the old four-cornered garment must have tzitzis on it, even if you're not using it. So you can't untie it from the first garment and put it on the second garment. Shmuel would hold that that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is on the person. A person should not wear a four-cornered garment unless he has tzitzis. If he's not going to use this garment anymore, he can untie the strings and put on a different garment. Tosfos says that that can't be the pshat. He proves it can't be the pshat. And he has a different pshat, and it has to do with the mitzvah of mezuzah, whether when you sell a house, can you take your mezuzahs down? That's a big shaila. If you sell your house to another Jew, are you allowed to take the mezuzahs down, or do you have to leave the mezuzahs up? So Tosfos makes an analogy between that and tzitzis. At any rate, we have these three disagreements. Can you light a candle of the Chanuka from another candle of the Chanuka? On the fourth night, can you take wick 4 that's already lit and light wick 3? Take wick 3 and light wick 2. Take wick 2 and light wick 1. That's the sugya we're going to go into. Tzitzis, there's a machlokes if you can untie strings from one garment to another. And Rabbah says the halacha is like Shmuel, you can't untie tzitzis from one garment to use on another garment. And as far as pulling the furniture on Shabbos, Adova she'einu maskaven, we paskin like Reb Shimon that it's mutter. Okay. Let's take a look. Now we're focusing in only on Chanuka. Can you light one wick from another wick? So we're 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines from the bottom of Chav Beis Amud Aleph. Yosef Hahume Rabbanan, Kamei Derav Adabar Ahava, Yosef V'Ka'ama. There was a young Talmud Chacham who was sitting in front of Rav Ada bar Ahava. Rav Ada bar Ahava was an older person already, and there's a young Talmud Chacham sitting in front of Rav Ada bar Ahava, and he says the following: V'Ka'ama. The reason that we're trying to understand, why does Rav hold, this was Baruch's question, why does Rav hold that you can't light one Chanuka candle from another Chanuka candle? It's both the same mitzvah. If the reason you're not allowed to use Chanuka candles is because you're not allowed to use it for your own benefit, to tie a shoe, or even to learn, is because, or to count money, is bizui mitzvah, you're insulting the mitzvah of Chanuka, then you should be able to light one Chanuka candle from another Chanuka candle, because there's no bezoyin. It's Chanuka candle for Chanuka candle. Nevertheless, this young student sitting in front of Rav Ada bar Ahava said, I'm telling you, the reason why Rav holds you can't light one Chanuka candle from another Chanuka candle, mishum bizu mitzvah. You're insulting the mitzvah. You can't even use a Chanuka for a Chanuka. Amalahu. So when Rav Ada bar Ahava heard this student say that, he said, Lo satzei sule. Nobody listened to what he just said. He's wrong. Haimid Rav, the reason for Rav is mishum de makchish mitzvah. The reason why Rav holds you can't light one Chanuka candle from another Chanuka candle is because you're weakening. It looks like you're weakening the mitzvah. Rashi says akhushe. Rashi says the michzi. It looks like keman de shokol nahira v'shoyev tzas milachluche shamnoi. What happens? It looks like you are taking candle 4, lighting candle 3, and when you light candle 3, some of the oil that's sucked into candle 4 is now going to be used to help light candle 3. So candle 4's oil is now being used to light candle 3. So it's not an innocent act. It looks like you're actually weakening candle 4 for the sake of candle 3. You're weakening one mitzvah for the next mitzvah, even though it's the same mitzvah. Chanukiah. But it looks like for the sake of number 3, you're going to take some oil out of number 4. And you're not allowed to do such a thing. What's the difference between the young student's reason and Rav Ada bar Ahava. The young student said you can't light one wick from another wick because it's insulting to the mitzvah. Rav Ada bar Ahava said, don't listen to him. This has nothing to do with insulting the mitzvah. This is because it looks like you're weakening the mitzvah. The Gemara says, my banayu, what's the difference between these two reasons? Because whenever you have two reasons for the same thing in the Gemara, this is not an academic challenge. We're not trying to figure out how many different reasons you can have for doing or not doing the same thing. If two people give us two reasons, we need to know why there are two reasons. There must be a difference between the two. My benai, what's the difference between these two reasons? The Gemara says, Ikka benai, there is a difference. The kamadlik mishraga l'shraga. If you're going to light one wick from another wick. Manda Oma. Now there are two possibilities. We're going to continue with this tomorrow. We're just going to open up two possibilities. The question that the Gemara started with was, can you light a Chanuka candle from a Chanuka candle? And we have been interpreting that question as one Chanuka wick to the next Chanuka wick. What happens if I change the case? I lit candle number 4, and I ran out of matches. I have no matches. So I take a little twig, and I light the twig from 4, and I light candle 3, candle 2, and candle 1 with the twig. That's called a kisei, a twig. There is a big difference between those cases. One case is I'm lighting Chanuka wick directly from another Chanuka wick. And one case is I'm lighting a twig from a Chanuka wick. And with that twig, I'm going to light other Chanuka wicks. There's a big difference. The difference being the in-between step. In one case, I'm going Chanuka wick to Chanuka wick. In another case, I'm lighting a twig from Chanuka wick. And with the twig, I'm going to light other Chanuka wicks. And that's going to be the difference that the Gemara is going to discuss. And this is going to really be the machlokas between the student who sat before Rav Ada bar Ahava and Rav Ada bar Ahava himself. The student heard the words. The student heard Rav said, you can't light ein madlikin ner Chanukah, ein madlikin miner lener. You can't light a candle to a candle. What the student understood those words meant was with a twig. Why? What did the student say? Rav says, I don't want you to light one Chanuka candle for another Chanuka candle because he says it's insulting. What's insulting? Because you're taking a twig that has nothing to do with the mitzvah, you're lighting it from one Chanuka candle, and now you're going to light another Chanuka candle with this twig. That's insulting to the first candle because you've lit a twig that is not a mitzvah, and now you're going to light another Chanuka candle. That's beautiful, but in between you did something, the twig is not a mitzvah, so it's insulting. That's what the student heard when he heard the halacha, don't light one candle to another candle. It meant through a twig. Rav Ada bar Ahava said, forget the twig. Even without the twig, you can't light one wick to another wick. Why? Because akhushe. It may not be embarrassing because it's one Chanuka wick to another Chanuka wick, but it's akhushe. It looks like you're weakening the first wick because the first wick has oil in it from wick 4. And now that oil in wick 4 is being used to light wick 3, and through that you're weakening wick 4. So basically, the young student, what does he feel? He feels the problem is only when you use an intermediate twig between the two wicks. But from wick to wick, that's fine. Rav Ada bar Ahava said, don't listen to him. Even if it's wick to wick, you can't do it. Why? Because it may not be insulting, but you're weakening the mitzvah because it looks like you're using oil in 4 for number 3. We'll see this in greater detail tomorrow, the machlokas between Bizui mitzvah and Makrish mitzvah.